Thanks everybody for coming. And so today we're doing a webinar that is a follow-up discussion to a panel that we hosted at the annual conference in November in Spokane, where we talked about the challenges of parenting in this field. And we really wanted to have an open dialogue about how it's pretty difficult in this field where we don't always have 9-to-5 schedules, how we can balance work life, especially as a parent. And so my name is Amanda Vielsdet, and I am a postdoc at the Borderlands Research Institute. And we're just going to go ahead and jump into this with some introductions. So as a parent, I am a stepmom, and I recently got married in October, but I've been involved with my partner and his child for about 6.5 years, helping to co-parent her. And that involved a long distance relationship for a while I was pursuing my PhD. And now I do a remote postdoc position. And so a lot of the parenting burden actually falls on me in the sense that I have a much more flexible schedule than my partner, who is also a biologist. But he's with the Forest Service, so he has a 9-to-5 job. And so I tend to be the one that does a lot more of the homework and pick up and drop off. And so that's just a little bit about myself, but I'd like to now introduce our two panelists. So Landon, if you could go first, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Absolutely. My name is Landon Schofield. I'm a range and wildlife biologist for the East Foundation, and I live in Kingsville, Texas, which is down in South Texas. So my parenting story actually started quite a while ago. During undergrad, actually, my first child, Ashton, was born in between my sophomore and junior year, and my wife and I, were pleasantly surprised with that. But at the time, in pursuing a degree in wildlife, there wasn't a lot of resources or even kind of places that I could go to even get advice or kind of some insights on how to navigate that new reality, but also with the added pressures of providing for a family, while also doing the best that I could in school, while also getting the experience needed to set myself up for future opportunities down the road. And so coming into it and having navigated it for a while, we're not perfect, but we have seemed to manage thus far. Also, my wife, she's a professional, she's a registered nurse. And so her schedule is, while flexible in a lot of regards, still requires myself to take a very equal and oftentimes more of the load in order to make sure those types of responsibilities are met for both of our kids, which opportunistically would require them being in the field with me, spending time in the office, or myself working from home to make sure that we can accommodate those types of things. And so just by way of introduction, so my wife and I, we've been married about 12 years. We currently now have 2 kids, Ashton, who's age 9, and Brooks, who is age 4. And like I said, we're down here in South Texas, and yeah, looking forward to the panel today.
Thank you. Masi, could you please introduce yourself?
Definitely. So my name is Masi Mejia, and I am a manager of education programs here at East Foundation. So I guess Landon and I are in 2 different, he does more of the science and I'm on the education side, but we get to work alongside each other when we need to. But as far as my parenting story, so I had actually started a PhD at the University of Idaho when my mother unexpectedly passed away, and I had to come back home to finish raising my 12-year-old brother and get him up and set him up for life. And I guess I don't want to say shortly after I sent him off, he turned 18 and was doing his thing. That's when I found out I was pregnant with my husband and our first child. And so he was born Christmas Day, and super healthy, amazing child. And then, did the whole breastfeeding, pumping thing, and thought I would end it a year to have my body back. And a month later, I'm pregnant. So we definitely wanted more kids, but I was hoping for a little bit more time to enjoy not giving my body to someone else. And so the plan was at the time to have 2 kids under 2, and which I do. I have 2 kids under 2, but kind of hit some roadblocks. I was prenatally diagnosed that my son would have heart defects. So that changed kind of our trajectory in terms of care, where we would be at to deliver. And so my son was born September 8th at 36 weeks. And we are still here in Houston. My home is Laredo. I forgot to mention that, but here in Houston, so about 5 hours away, and helping him get the care that he needs. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah. Thank you both for sharing your stories. And I would just like to make a quick statement of, we're all pretty young parents, and we have our unique perspectives, but certainly we are not representative of all of the many different types of parents and parenting journeys in this field. And so we hope that what we talk about today is broadly applicable to those of you that are parents and thinking about becoming parents, but also knowing that we're not trying to say we are representative of all types of parents in this field. So with that said, I think it's time we jump into the meat of our discussion today. So I guess I would really like to know, I'll start with you, Mossy, and then Landon, you can answer afterwards. But my question is, what factors led you to decide to become a parent while working in this profession? And what were some of the challenges you expected to face while you were planning to become a parent? And how did you prepare for those with both your partner and your supervisor in the work life?
Yeah, so I think for me, I was actually previously married and got divorced. With that first individual, I never saw myself being a parent. Just something was off, and I think that's very important. And with my current husband, I don't want to, he's pretty awesome. He's amazing. Don't let it get to his head. But, that's when we decided, okay, maybe we want something more. And one of the factors was definitely for me, finances. I grew up seeing my mom struggle. She was a teacher, and I wanted to make sure, that I could provide everything that my future children wanted or needed and wanted. And so that was something that my partner and I discussed, is getting our finances in order. And then COVID happened. So it was just, we started trying, right? And I don't think with him we faced any challenges because we were pretty much work from home. I was Zooming into classrooms. So part of my duties as manager of education programs here at East Foundation is I go into the classroom and do science presentations with the hopes that we can get students out to one of our ranches. And so we actually have 6 ranches, 217,000 acres of ranch land. And our mission is to promote the advancement of land stewardship through ranching science and education. So we merge closely with the ranching side, with our cattle operations, and then with our science side. And so I was pretty fortunate that because the schools were Zooming, I could Zoom and do the work that I needed to. So there's Zoom videos of me being, 9 months pregnant and Zooming to students, doing skins and skulls over the internet. And that was so wonderful to be able to do that and not have to go to the ranch because schools were still pretty locked down. So everything was Zoom. Now, once I delivered, I was very fortunate that I have my mother-in-law, and she is a stay-at-home grandma. So she has my son at that time in the other room, and I'm able to work. And my water cooler breaks are going to play with my son at that time. And so I think one of the challenges, as COVID was starting to die down or Texas was opening back up was definitely, okay, I'm going to go into the classroom. Kids are notorious for bringing all different types of germs home. What am I going to bring home? And we were very fortunate up until now, I guess, to not have any big things happen as in terms with COVID. My husband, he is an insurance adjuster. And so it's really nice because he works 8 to 5 Monday through Friday, where my work is more sporadic depending on what county I need to be in the state of Texas, or what school or what ranch and what time. And sometimes I do work Sundays. So that that really allowed us the flexibility. And even now, I'm pretty fortunate. Now that my son is in the hospital, working with my supervisor to do what work I can remotely and get that done, so that I can still be here for my son, for my other son, for my 3-month-old. So yeah, lots of challenges, but also lots of positive, at least for me and the work that I do within the realm of natural resource education.
Yeah, so my entry into parenthood, like I said earlier, was a little bit of a surprise, a very welcome surprise, but at the same time, against kind of maybe that initial planning that my wife had, for our 5-10-year plan or however that might look. But looking back, it's funny, it's things happen for a reason, and the timing definitely was appropriate for us. Even though in the moment, we had a lot of late night chats where we were extremely overwhelmed, not exactly sure if me continuing to pursue a degree in wildlife was the correct decision for myself and the family. And so there was a lot of, hard talks that had to happen as a result of that. So some of those initial challenges obviously came with just juggling an undergrad type schedule and demands, along with, supporting and having a family at the same time. My wife at the time was working a night shift at the hospital there. And so that required me to, my study sessions weren't in the library and weren't with a group, but rather they were at home, while feeding the baby and getting her to bed. And then by myself, I quickly realized that, I was, I guess, unique in the fact that I was in that situation, and there wasn't a large network of experience that I could draw on in terms of asking questions, from fellow students, but also faculty at the time. There wasn't a lot of, I wouldn't say there wasn't support, there just wasn't a lot of resources in really helping navigate that unique situation. And not that I was looking for any exceptions, but rather just someone to talk to and kind of vent some frustrations or challenges or things of that nature. And so a lot of those initial challenges were internalized, and then continuing on, and pursuing a graduate degree, moving further away from family, having to really develop a new network of friends and support group, was another challenge, but was critical in order to continue, growing and developing my family and supporting them, but also, doing the work that's required in graduate school to prepare yourself for a future long-term career. And so I think some of those initial challenges for us was being able to find a network around us that could relate, but that could also, be that support when family wasn't present. And, for the majority of Emily and I's marriage, we haven't lived close to family. So we haven't been able to have that immediate type of resource to have a babysitter or, drop the kids off on a weekend, or something came up at work and we need to find a place or find someone to pick up the kids from school. And so we've really had to rely on building that network wherever we've been. And for better or for worse, we've been extremely blessed in being able to do that and to incorporate that into how we make it all work currently. And so I guess just on that last part, Amanda, with respect to how do we prepare for these, how do we kind of prepare for this with our partners as well as our supervisors? I think for me, the biggest point of success in kind of making it all work is during those times of, I guess, interviews for graduate positions or employment or any type of opportunity. I was very forthcoming in terms of, my at-home situation, that my wife works, I have kids, and essentially kind of interviewing that employer or that opportunity as a way to know if I'm going to be a good fit for them, just as much as if they're a good fit for me. And it's important to know how your employer will potentially handle you needing to take time off to tend to a sick kid, or them understanding that, hey, I don't have family here. I might just have to take off a couple hours early on a certain day in order to make a dance recital or a soccer game, or go pick a kid up from school that's sick. Those types of things that are real life and are very important, are a reality of our careers and just the nature of the type of work that we're in. And so I think it's important from day one to have a very open and honest discussion with your employer as to expectations and not accommodations, but just the culture of their workplace and how your family life and how you want your family to be structured and oriented. How does that fit within their culture? And it makes for a better situation in the long run if you're able to have those types of conversations on the front end.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, that's why I'm in my remote postdoc right now. It was not a remote position. I negotiated with my bosses. I was very upfront. I told them I've been doing long distance from my partner and our daughter for 4 years, and I'm sick of it. Like, how likely is it that you would let me, live in Arizona, even though it's for a Texas university? And thankfully, yeah, they were very open to it. And it's been a year now and it's been going really well. And a big part of that also was like, we have our support system here in Arizona. And going back to your guys' comments of stay-at-home grandmas and, not having a support system from a family side of things, it takes a village. Like, that saying is so accurate. And whether it's found family through like friends and community, or true, blood related family that can be there for you, I really don't know how we would get through without our respective set of parents to help with childcare as well. So I have more questions for you both. I'll let Landon go first this time. So what systems are in place for you at work? And I feel like since you both work for the East Foundation, some of this might be a little similar, but you have different challenges, obviously. But what systems are in place for you at work that help you maintain your work-life balance? And were those systems there as a part of the East Foundation, or were those things that you negotiated with your supervisors that you had to kind of ask for? And if they were something you had to negotiate for, like, how did you go about doing that?
Yeah, great question. So some of the things that I knew that would be important to both Emily and I, if we were to take an opportunity with the East Foundation, was to be able to really incorporate, my work culture into our family culture as well. That being, so for example, that involves, my kids know exactly what types of projects are going on during what types of years. They've been out on the ranches, they've been out on different projects, from prescribed fires to handling deer and, able to watch ocelot captures, things of that nature. And it's important to include them, but in making sure that sort of culture was going to be fostered, it required certain types of questions. Certain logistics had to be in place. For instance, would my family be allowed to travel in a company truck? Are they allowed to, be on the ranch? Are they allowed, certain things like that, things that we wouldn't really think twice about, but, do hold some sense of liability from the sense of the company or the organization that you work for. And so I think kind of the time that I was ultimately hired on with the East Foundation, they were still relatively new. We still are relatively new. And so a lot of those different kind of frameworks and things were still being evolved and shaped. And so, I had an opportunity to kind of influence some of those policies moving forward. The workforce that has since been hired is, we're definitely trending younger. And so it's things, younger families. And so it's things that they'll continue to evolve. But again, it's just having those upfront, honest conversations. And thankfully, you know, I am able to involve my kids out on the ranch with my work, whatever it involves. They can be as involved as they'd like to, and or not, kind of whatever suits their interest. What was another part of your question there, Amanda? I know there was more to it. I apologize.
Oh, that's okay. They were long-winded. I maybe should have broken them up for you. But I guess, you know, did you have to put those in place, or was your employer pretty open to kind of accommodating your work-life balance?
Yeah, so our employer was very open to accommodating that, and especially understanding, you know, I'm originally from Idaho, from out west, had moved to Louisiana for grad school, and then from Louisiana had moved to South Texas for the job. And so obviously recognizing that we were very far removed from maybe that normal support group that we normally had, that it was going to require, you know, yeah, maybe I have to step out and pick up kids or something of that nature. While nothing was ever written down in policy, you know, the culture at the East Foundation, I feel, is very oriented towards supporting those families, especially the families of those that work for the foundation. And so, like I kind of said earlier, you know, I treated that initial employment interview as kind of interviewing them as well, because our families are incredibly important to us, and making sure we're not selling ourselves short at work, as well as, more importantly, for our kids and for our partners. We need to make sure that we're entering into a work environment that can help foster that as well. And, you know, I feel like I've been extremely fortunate in that regard with the foundation, in that they are family oriented and supporting us in that I guess in that nature. But, you know, one really big positive about this type of work that we do is, you know, it's not 9 to 5, and that's great. You know, that's a lot of flexibility, a lot of times built into it. I knew that I had the goal early on that I never wanted to have to ask my employer to be able to leave work to go to a soccer game or dance recital or gymnastics or whatever that was, you know, to be able to support my kids. And you know, this career, this type of work, you know, definitely affords us that opportunity.
Thanks, Landon. I mean, so Mossy, just to repeat the question for you, you know, how do you do work-life balance? And I mean, we heard a little bit about how the East Foundation is very pro-family, which is really nice. But if you could just elaborate for your specific situation as a mom, in a sense that I feel that we've come a long way as a society and as a profession, in the sense that it's more common for women to, you know, hold higher position roles, to still be family oriented, but also from the other side of, for dads to be more, you know, involved with their family than kind of what maybe was more common many generations ago, where the dad wasn't so involved in family life. So
yeah, no, that's a great, so I think for me, my husband is very introverted, and I don't think I'm extroverted. I'm an introverted extrovert, but because I have a forward-facing position where I'm talking to students of all ages, I have to talk to teachers, principals across 7 counties here in South Texas. My husband hates going to the grocery store with me, because I will run into someone and I will have to talk to them, and maybe not will like have to talk to them, but it might be a teacher, it might be a parent, it might be a student. And so he always kind of like, you know, when is this conversation going to end? And it, you know, it really only lasts 2 minutes. But I think, you know, curbside pickup has kind of helped maintain that work-life balance, because you know, I don't want to say, I guess when I'm with family, I don't want to talk about work, because sometimes that is work, right? But those conversations do happen outside of work hours with my family, and my husband has to sit there and listen about whatever's going on work-wise. Another thing that I do to kind of maintain that work-life balance is I have a personal cell phone. So that is nice, because I can, you know, when it is the weekend and I am spending time with my family, I can put my work phone aside. Do I look at it on the weekends? Yes, I do. I've tried to minimize that time just to be cognizant of the time that I spend with my family. I used to also check my work email on my personal cell phone, but they did the two-factor authentication, so I can't do that anymore, which is great, to maintain that balance. But sometimes I'm like, I have to, I can't do whatever needs to get done because I don't have my work phone. I think something that Landon spoke of before is time, right? Children, whether they get sick or you need to take them to XYZ, that makes it easier, is that you can just do what you need to do, and having a supervisor that trusts you to get your work done, I think is very important too. And East Foundation, we're very fortunate, is very family oriented. I guess I've taken my son when he was pretty close. I think he was around 3 months old. I took him to the ranch. We didn't get to see an ocelot, but we spent some time in our natural history collection because I was picking up some specimens. And so I think it is very nice that I can bring my son along, and our coworkers, and now at the baby that we have, or the kid that we have with us, because that makes all the difference to ensure that we have a welcoming environment. And so it was kind of funny when I told my supervisor. So we have this big event where we have 1,500 students come out to the ranch over the course of the week. And so she was talking to me about some potential dates, and I hadn't told her I was pregnant yet with our second. And so she said, okay, we're going to aim for October. And I said, that's fine. I can prep all of it, but I need to tell you something. I'm pregnant, so I won't be here, but I'll do all the prep work for that. And so I think that was a challenge in itself, is for that event, I am the contact person for 15 different schools. And so personally handing that over to someone else to ensure that it gets done was difficult for me, but I'm glad it did get done, and it happened. And I got to enjoy the maternity leave, but that was something else, and maybe that's us as professionals. We want to make sure that things are done our way to ensure that they do get done. But that's probably something else that I could work on, is trusting others to ensure success.
Yeah, such a good point. I struggle with, like, in terms of, it's not a 9-to-5 job in academia, so putting work away, right? Like, at 5 p.m., like being with my family, or on the weekends, I struggle with that too. And it's all self-induced for me. I'm not expected to work on those off times. I just find that I worry still that I'm missing something, and that someone's going to be upset because I maybe am prioritizing something that's really, my personal life, when they have something really urgent that needs to get done. But I find that's thankfully more an internal thing that I have to work on, and not really an expectation from my supervisors. And since I'm lucky, similar to you too, in that regard. And yes, I saw that Kathy put this in the chat, but just a quick announcement. We are going to have time at the end for Q&A from the audience with our panelists. So please feel free to write your questions in the Q&A portion of the chat function, and we will get to those in just a little bit. So I have one more question for you both. So what other support systems do you use? You both kind of touched a little bit on having family or having friends and a system in place, but what do you use to make sure that you are both a valuable and productive employee while still being a very involved parent, such as grandparents helping to babysit, partners that maybe have more flexible schedules, that kind of thing? I'll see if you'd like to go first.
Oh, for sure. So I think I'm very blessed and lucky that my husband sees what needs to get done. We share an iPhone notes together. So we can constantly see what's getting edited. You know, we have a grocery list, a to-do list. So that's nice. Sometimes it doesn't happen. Sometimes I have to remind them. And I think maybe that's something, you know, being the default parent. I think I am the default parent. Right now we're in 2 separate locations. I'm here with one baby. He's at home with the other, with our toddler. And he told me last week, man, I don't know how people could clean and go to work. And I said, yeah, you know, that's kind of what I've been doing these past 2 years. But I thought that was funny, just to share, you know, being mindful of the mental load that comes with being a parent. And I think as moms, because we might have carried a child or be more in tune with our emotions, that's something to think about is, you know, maybe our partners need a little bit of direction. Something that I did with my husband is I walked him through how to use the bottle sterilizer, how to use the bottle warmer, and how to clean my pump part. So that was one system that I had in place to make it easier on me, and just kind of saying, hey, can you do this while I do this? So taking off those tasks. As far as being a productive and valuable employee, it is amazing now that Microsoft Office is available on cell phones. So it's nice to pull up whatever Excel file or whatever document I need to look at really quick when my supervisor asks me for information. Being able to pull that up without having to set up my laptop is really nice. So I think we at East Foundation have it really nice when it comes to technology in that regard, because that makes us more efficient as employees. And I think just communicating with my supervisor on what needs to get done. So for that event where we have, you know, 1,500 students come out, I have a master Excel file that got shared with everyone, and kind of, you know, for me, I had prepped it prior to maternity leave in case I did, you know, in case my son did come early, and sure enough, he did. So that was easy for pretty much anyone to pick up the pieces and keep going. And so I think that's what helps, is knowing what needs to get done during what time of the year, and just staying on top of that and communicating to your supervisors is what helps me be a productive employee.
Yeah, I think some of those tools that mentioned that Mossy had mentioned, excuse me, you know, they may seem kind of trivial or simple, but they really do make a huge difference. For us in our situation, Google Calendar is something that we can keep, you know, our family, I personally live and die by our Google Calendar. I don't know how we would make it all work if we weren't on the same page from a scheduling standpoint. So Google Calendar, also like Alexa lists, you know, just some of those different apps and tools that are available. And something that actually crossed my mind when Mossy was talking about kind of just keeping the home under control, right? Cooking, cleaning, things like that. One thing that actually we started during the pandemic, because we were home a lot more and making a lot more messes, was we invested in a robot vacuum. And just the fact that the floors can get swept and that part of the housework can get done while no one's there is surprisingly a huge thing. You wouldn't expect it, but it's made a big difference in just our attitudes of getting home late at night or whatever it is. But just some of those added supports that we've been able to lean on, my wife and I, you know, since you know, living away the majority of our marriage from family. The immediate family that can offer that support is our church family, as well as just the new friends and networks that we established within the community, you know, that over time that's required to develop those types of things. And, you know, it's reciprocated, right? We do the same things for their kids and their families as well. And, you know, and as a result, you know, we can lean on them in those times that we may need somebody to drop something and go pick up our kids from something because something came up at work, you know. And so it's a lot of give and take, but leaning heavily on those types of groups is important and has been important for us. And then, yeah, in ensuring that we continue to be a productive employee. I think it's, pivotal to establish a relationship and want to work for somebody that believes in you, that trusts you, and that also knows that at the end of the day, like, we're going to deliver on what we've committed to from a work output standpoint. And as long as those things are being met and at the quality that they're expected, at least I found that you're afforded a lot of flexibility. And, and that flexibility is extremely valuable and something that you can then translate into a home dynamic or a family structure as well. But yeah, I know that that's not the situation for everybody. Bosses are all different, right? Supervisors are all different. And it's hard to know exactly the type of person that you are potentially going to be working for. But as much as you can fill that out and have those honest conversations with them, it's important.
Well, thank you so much for answering my questions. I'm now going to read some questions from the audience to you both. And so the first one is—
Amanda, can I jump in and answer Melinda's question? So I see, I see a pumping question. So I need to address it. So she says a lot of jobs are not 9 to 5. And so right now it doesn't seem like this is geared towards wildlife professionals. And so I see that you're getting up with a baby at 3 a.m. Then you have to go off and do wildlife surveys and pump in your work truck while getting approached by the public. I think this is me. So I am exclusively pumping right now for breast milk. So every 3 hours, except at night, I am pumping milk. And I did this with my firstborn as well. I pumped for a year. So many times I was spending, staying up with the baby, waking up because someone doesn't hear the baby crying. So I get up and take care of the baby. Oh, then 6 a.m. comes around, you got to take off and to the ranch to meet a busload of kids by 8. And, there were times where a biologist, very fortunate that we work closely with our state biologist in that county. And I feel very comfortable with him. We had to go harvest a white-tailed deer to do a deer necropsy to show students. And I would say, hold on, Eric, I need a pump. I need to put away my milk. And so I think knowing that we're all mammals in the field of wildlife profession, and, mammary glands are going to do what mammary glands do, helped in expressing, hey, hold on, I need to go do this. And then sitting in meetings, right? If you're pumping, you have to express, or, if you're pumping or nursing, you've got to get that milk out. And I've pumped in front of our CEO sitting in on meetings. I have a wearable pump. It was kind of funny. At the time, our chief science officer heard a little motor running and kind of turned back, but didn't make the full turn to see what was going on. And I just say, oh yeah, I'm pumping, and keep going. So I think that is one thing, maybe, because I go into different classrooms or I'm out at the ranch, I don't have a pumping room. So it's kind of wherever I feel comfortable enough, and then making people feel comfortable enough that it's okay. Even here at the hospital, very fortunate that this is a breastfeeding friendly hospital, but doctors will come in and, oh my gosh, she's pumping. And I'm like, no, it's okay. Like, it's okay. You are a doctor, a medical doctor. You should know human anatomy. I'm perfectly fine with you telling me what needs to happen for my son. And continuing to get that milk out. And then I see, working for companies that have high seasonal needs and being out with a baby. I think having this second baby really showed the need. So I guess on average, we will impact, and I say we, it's me and one other educator, 13,000 students in the classroom. So that's us visiting students in a normal non-COVID year, with another 5,000 students coming out to the ranch. And so we're very fortunate that we have finally opened up a position for an additional educator to come join us, because we do need the extra help for that, especially if something comes up. We've had field lessons, And I've had to call and say, hey, my baby's sick. Can you take over Andrea? Which is one of our coworkers, and sure enough, she's stepped in to take that. But I think, those are all normal things that happen, and adapting for that. If it was up to my supervisor, though, I think she would say, bring the baby to the field lesson. But I think, I don't want to say, maybe she forgot what it's like to have a baby, because she has her children are older, and the needs of a baby. So hopefully that kind of answers that, Melinda, at least from my perspective. We do need to recognize that we need more people, right? And that need unfortunately requires more funds to help fund those positions to make the impacts that we have. And then I see another question from Jessica, and I struggle with this of, I feel like I'm never present enough for my kids, or I'm working at a job that I love for someone else to watch my kids during the day. I totally struggle with that. If I leave early, like 6 a.m., I don't get to kiss my son goodbye because I'll wake him up, and then there goes his whole routine for the day. And my husband doesn't pick up our son till 5:30. By the time he gets home, it's 6. By the time we eat, shower, it's already 8 p.m. And time to go to bed. So was there any fun time, like quality fun time? Maybe a little bit, but it's definitely hard because, you're also trying to cook dinner, do laundry, multitask. Even though it's past 5 p.m., you're probably still trying to end work stuff, which I don't think our minds are programmed to have that on-off switch, especially if, you have to be up at 6 a.m. the next day prepping. What do I need in the field or take with me, or what do I need to pack lunch wise? So I don't know, hopefully those answered those 2 questions from my perspective.
I'll just say really quickly that I think people have been parents in this field for obviously way longer than just the 3 of us have, but I think it's important to have these types of conversations because I don't think there's necessarily enough awareness, kind of going back to Melinda's point of like, what do we do? What are the nuts and bolts of how we get this done? And there are people who have figured it out for themselves. And some companies like East Foundation have made it their mission to make employees feel really welcome, but that's not always the case, especially with more government agency style things where they have a set way of doing things. They have to make sure their agency runs a set way. And so I think conversations, open, honest conversations about what it means to be a parent, and having that conversation with your supervisors and with your colleagues. Jumping on Everett's question, having conversations with your colleagues about, this is my schedule, this is when I'm going to be gone. And obviously things pop up that are unavoidable, unpredictable. But I think having colleagues and supervisors that recognize that we can't always foresee things, and that we, as long as we are reliable employees, we're going to accomplish what we can, and just having that emotional support within the work, having a positive work environment towards parents is a big thing that I think colleagues can promote on that regard. And I'm going to answer Emily's question very quickly because I experienced something very similar. So 2 wildlife biologists that both want their PhDs, currently living together after being long distance for 1.5 years. We know we will have to split again, most likely. Any advice? I think there are more definitions of success today than the tangible forms of success that stem from high titles and high paying jobs, in the regards that you are successful when you are happy, right? And if prioritizing more of the family oriented goals in life are going to make you and your partner happy, that it's not necessarily about sacrifice in terms of should it be your career or your family, but more that there might be some delays in your career, or there might be delays in starting a family, knowing that you're going to have to potentially move long distance. But I think the 3 of us can say that having open, honest conversations with future PhD advisors or future supervisors of, I have a partner, I want to start a family, or I have a family. This is kind of what I need. Is that going to work for you? And if it's not, is that really a place you want to spend the next few years getting your PhD at? Is that a place you really want to spend potentially the next 10 years of your career at if they're not going to be supportive of those work-life balance and goals? So I hope that answers Emily's question. And let's see, I'm going to read Cassie's question. They work in a federal system as a wildlife biologist and currently looking for promotions. And with that means moving, settling in, and learning a new area and workplace. Any advice on how to bring concerns about flexibility up to my new supervisor and coworkers without sounding like I am not committed to my new team? My husband works in the private sector and just isn't afforded the amount of time off as I am. So when our son is sick or has doctor's appointments, it's usually up to me to handle these things. So Landon, I think that might be a good one for you to tackle.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I actually relate to it because between my wife's employment and myself, you know, I fall under where I have a little bit more flexibility and paid time off. So, you know, I draw that short straw that I'm the one that has to go to those doctor's appointments and things like that. And I guess my advice would be, you know, I've never gotten myself in trouble by being honest and forthcoming, especially as it relates to things about my family and potential not conflicts, but just situations that may arise. I think knowing that, I think the more that your coworkers are familiar with your family situation and even just meeting them, you know, in casual settings as well, affords them the opportunity to, you know, be more supportive and understanding in those moments when it may seem like you're not being part of the team, but really it's just that you are being required to be elsewhere momentarily. And so I think just, you know, being able to help integrate coworkers as friendships, to build them up as and have them as a support that you can lean on would only yield dividends that way. But like I said, I think just having that being honest and forthcoming in terms of what might be involved in those expectations, especially as it requires getting settled into a new location and having to find new doctors, new dentists, you know, all those little things that, I mean, cause me hesitancy to ever want to move again because you have to reestablish yourself in all those different places. Just saying, you know, this is a reality of me relocating and I want to be a part of the team, but I'm going to need some support to be able to succeed both at home as well as in the workplace.
Thank you. Let's jump to Jordan's question. Did any of you experience a time when you had to reevaluate expectations with your supervisors, partners, or even yourselves on what type of results you can produce when being split between a time-demanding job and a time-demanding lifestyle?
I can share something on this. And so like I said, my wife is a registered nurse. And so I was not kind of forced to have this conversation with my employer around the pandemic. And where demands on my wife to be at the hospital were, you know, upwards of 6, almost 7 days a week. And so that required me to be the stay-at-home dad when kids were no longer going to school. You know, they were doing all their normal things at home, and those expectations for parents to fill all those roles as caregivers and teachers and everything else, you know, unfortunately in our situation, fell on me. And so that required me to have a conversation with my employer, with my supervisor about when my new normal operating hours were going to have to be as a result of that. And they've since evolved a little bit, obviously, as things have gotten a little bit more back to normal, but still require me, you know, I work early morning until about 2. And then I am oftentimes the one that goes and picks up kids from carpool, you know, whatever doctor's appointments, we do those in the afternoons as needs be. And then, you know, when I'm at work and I hit it hard. And when I'm at home, I'm at home. And so it does take a lot of effort. It does take conscious, you know, forcing myself not to look at my work phone until the kids are in bed. And then to make up that remaining work day, I don't go back to work, but I work from home the remaining bits of the evening to make sure that I wrap up any loose ends that I needed to wrap up prior to the normal 8 to 5 work time. And so mine's kind of a staggered type work day. to where like, I work the majority of the day, take a pause, and then hit it again in the evening. And, I'm still able to be productive. Expectations are still being met. And I haven't ever had to have another follow-up from my supervisor saying, hey, we need to change because you're not quite performing the way that you need to be, thankfully. And so, yes, I've had that conversation and just being honest and being like, this is where I think it can fit. And I think also coming to the table with solutions, especially solutions that are positive for you and your home situation, will be well received, as opposed to saying, here's the problem, help me figure this out. But if you show some initiative and problem solving and come up with some ideas that meet both your employers as well as your own goals and priorities, then you'll be much more successful on the back end. And I think one thing that my wife would say, I think that we've been able to make work, or at least something that we've been able to use to make this whole situation work is, you have to clearly define your priorities as a family. So define those priorities, but even more importantly, you have to be willing to defend them. And oftentimes that'll require, having a conversation with your employer in terms of, okay, I'm falling short here at home as a result of this and this. Here's what I propose. Does this sound like a reasonable solution? So I think being solution driven, having honest conversations definitely helps ease that sort of navigating.
Yeah, I guess I'll just add that working from home as a remote position has definitely, it coincided with fully becoming a stepmom, and it required conversations with my partner and like myself of what are my expectations for myself during a day. And similar to Landon, I kind of have like a split day where I work really hard in the mornings, and then I focus more on my daughter when she's home from school, and then kind of work again later in the evenings. But because I have a more flexible schedule, it's kind of then meant that my husband needs to make sure that he has conversations with his supervisors of like, I need you to be here on a day that I have a meeting there. I cannot pick her up from school. So you're going to have to make sure that you're available. And so it's constant open communication with my partner and our respective supervisors on our schedules. And yeah, being solution driven. And then in terms of myself, like knowing what I am capable of in the amount of time I have available for work, in the sense that, if I know I need to pick her up at 3 p.m. from school and that we're going to be busy until 5 p.m., that means I need to, make sure I get all of those really important deadlines taken care of before that 3 p.m. where I got to leave for work. So knowing your own productivity and being open and honest with your partner, I'd say, is a huge one. We have lots of questions still, so I hope we can get through one or two more. I'm going to leave Bruce's comment because it's a complex one. But in terms of what do you guys think that somebody like the Wildlife Society can do to support parents and young professionals that are struggling with these different work-life balance issues that are kind of new in our field?
I think that's a good question. Man, it was so nice that during COVID we adapted to being on Zoom, but I think that makes it even more challenging because in theory Zoom is accessible everywhere now. I'm fortunate enough to be able to take this call from a hospital room, so still being here present for work and being present for my son. But I think one of the things that we'll have to look at are maybe for the panel that we did in Spokane, we sent out a brief survey, so maybe expanding that survey to see what other challenges parents have across the board. And then I see like a great question, what tips or ideas do you have for a single parent? So putting together a list that is accessible for everyone, because as Amanda mentioned, we are just sharing our stories and our voices, but we know that not every parents like us or is set up to have, you know, in-laws that can you pick up and help with childcare. And so it's definitely challenging, especially with so many different types of careers within wildlife. You know, Landon's out in Kingsville and has to go to the ranches, where I have to go into classrooms, which makes it that much more difficult, I think. But we definitely need to be having these conversations. And sometimes, you know, we're fortunate that we work at East Foundation, but we know that that is not the case at every organization or every under supervisor that is understanding and can make accommodations. And so I think what Landon said, you know, for an individual bringing up those accommodations, I'm looking at Melinda's comment of raising a teen and being a single parent. I felt like when I was raising my teenage brother, I felt like a single parent. And there were at least 5 times that he, you know, I would take off to the ranch, which is an hour and a half away, and he'd call me and say, I missed the bus. You know, and as a typical teenage boy might do. And I'd have to set up an Uber ride for him to catch the bus, because at that time I didn't have my in-laws. It was just him and I in South Texas. And so now it's kind of crazy. Like, I see my son and I'm like, man, would I put my son on an Uber? Probably not. But that was, you know, that's what I had to make work. And that was just the flexibility that I had to make happen, because, you know, I was an hour and a half away from home. So it's not like I could just drive back to Laredo to take him to school. I don't know, Landon, do you have?
Yeah, I think the only thing I'd add is, you know, I guess from the sake of the society and just as wildlife professionals as a whole, regardless of your affiliation or the agency or organization that you work for, is fostering an environment where, you know, there isn't any shame when you bring up a concern about things going on at home, to where you feel like you're not contributing or you're not one of the team. I think early on, definitely, you know, it was almost something I kept from interviews, you know, for tech positions and things, just because I didn't want them to view that as a potential negative against me, because I might be drawn in other areas. And I think, you know, fostering a culture and an environment where you can bring up those real concerns is extremely important. And, you know, I didn't find that sort of support early on. And quite frankly, it was a tough pill to swallow to even continue in the wildlife field, because I couldn't see a good marriage between both wanting to have and grow a family and also pursue aspirations within the wildlife field. And I think, yeah, just fostering a culture where there is no shame behind sticking up for those priorities that you identified within your home, within your family, and also making sure that that's reciprocated from whatever organization or agency or whatever that you are affiliated with. You know, there's no repercussions or you know, anything negative that can be misconstrued that way.
Well, we are running out of time and don't have time to address everybody's comments, so I apologize for that. Thank you both so much for your time and your insights. And I just want to leave the audience with kind of one final thought, since we aren't able to address everyone's comments. I think the biggest takeaway is communication, supporting diversity and being parents is part of that, and that there are different parents, and finding support within your community and within your work situation of, you know, finding other single parents that have maybe done this, you know, how did they tackle it, as, you know, they also work for a state agency. And so I would highly suggest, you know, being really involved with the Wildlife Society working groups like the Women of Wildlife and Early Career Professionals, finding that community for how we can continue to have these discussions so that we can all, you know, have a better work-life balance. So thank you all so much again for joining us. And we hope to talk to you guys more about parenting issues in the future. So thank you.